Hi, thank you for joining me. When this video is over, click on the word More below the video window. You will see the word Bonus. Click on that and it will take you right into another video. Enjoy. Now, on with the show. Hi, come on in. Thank you for dropping by. Tonight, I'm going to be sharing some more miracles with you. So let's get started. I've got 4 near-death experience stories for you. They are miraculous. Near-death experiences, or NDEs as they're often called, are actually fairly frequent. I'm a great fan of YouTube. And if you type in NDEs, do a YouTube search and type in NDE or near-death experience, you will have hours, literally hours, of videos that you can choose from. Some of them are marginally interesting. Some of them are very interesting, and some of them are just absolutely interesting. Some of them are a little way out there, but you can be your own judge. But anyway, I went to a church where there was a young girl who had died. Her body was was there for a viewing, and it was a Wednesday night, I think, and I went to be there really for no other reason except to sign the register and to meet the mother, and if there was anything I could say to make her feel better, but there wasn't. This was a very sad case. The little girl, 15 years old, died of cancer, and she weighed a good bit less than 100 pounds. So I sat down next to the mother, and the most stupid thing came out of my mouth. I said, well, you know, she's in a better place. I couldn't believe I said that, but I'm glad I did. Because the mother said, oh, yes, I know. I've been there. I said, what? Now, I had never heard of NDEs before. And she told me that she had been on the surgeon's table for a heart operation, and she died. And she lifted up out of her body, and she was up near the ceiling, and she was looking down and watching what the doctors and the anesthesiologists were doing. And a little bit later, she was told, I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. Then she went out into the hallway, and out there was a tunnel. And she went into the tunnel, and there was light at the end of the tunnel, and she went toward it. And she could feel herself accelerating and going toward the light. And when she finally got to the light, there was no other way to to explain it. It was heaven. It was the most beautiful garden scene she had ever seen. There were flowers everywhere, colors that she had never seen before. The grass was emerald green and it was vibrant. And she walked toward this big tree, and next to the tree was a man who turned around, and it was Jesus. And I thought, yeah, okay, everybody sees Jesus. Well, she did see Jesus. And he talked to her for a moment and told her that um, her body was going to be all right and that she had to go home. She had to go back because she had things she had to take care of. So she went back into the tunnel and whoosh, off she went. And a few minutes later, she was in the operating room again, and she somehow figured out how to get into her body, and she got into the body. And that was that. And there she sat telling me this story. Well, it was the most outlandish thing I had ever heard, but I believed her. Um, about a year later, I was taking a lady that I knew from work. I was taking her home. She didn't live too far from us, so I let her commute with me. She didn't have a car. And one time she told me about a story about her and some friends went to the Cheat River in West Virginia. Now that's known locally as a great rafting river. It's got a lot of rapids. It's a dangerous river. It offers a lot of squeals and screams, and it's a lot of fun. So that's what she went for. And on the way down the river, she was bounced out of the raft and into the water. And this was in the spring of the year. The water was really cold. And they couldn't find her. They couldn't stop because they were in the middle of shooting the rapids. So they went a few miles, and finally it came out in an open area, and they paddled over to shore. And a bunch of them jumped out and got into the water, and they looked for this woman, and they couldn't find her. And they came back to the boat, and it had been about half an hour. And they noticed a lump under the raft, and they lifted it up, and there she was in the water, face down. Well, she was dead, or for every intent and purpose, she was dead. But they pulled her out, and they gave her CPR, and they wouldn't stop. They just kept working and working and working. And after a while, excuse me, after a while, they got her out of the water. Out of the water, and they got the water out of her lungs, and she started breathing. And she said that she was good after that, and they went on and finished the trip. I said, well, now tell me something. When you were in the water and you were out, did you see anything like maybe the other side? And she said, well, yes, I'll tell you about it. I said, okay. She says, I came up on the shore, up next to the shore, and my aunt and uncle were there. And they reached down and they pulled me out. They weren't particularly happy to see me, but they pulled me out of the water and told her that this is where everybody goes. And she looked around, and there were a lot of people just moseying around. No one was happy. Um, they all looked very gray, a little dark, and there was no sunlight. It was a heavy, dark cloud over everything. And way, way off in the distance, you could see skylight. And she said the place was just very, very bad, and she didn't like it. And the aunt and uncle told her she had to go back. And she said, I don't want to go back. You got to go back. And so they took her to the water, and she got in the water, and she went back. And that's when they apparently that's when they got the water out of her lungs and got her breathing again. Now compare that NDE with the first one I was telling you. There's a big difference. There is a big, big difference. And I have a feeling it has to do with where you're going. The lady that had the surgery that went bad and she died and went to heaven and was with Jesus for a few minutes, she had a good experience. But this other lady did not. And so I asked her, I said, are you a Christian? She says, oh, yes. Oh, yes, I'm a Christian. I said, well, how do you know? She says, well, I taught Sunday school for many years. I said, uh-huh. Teaching Sunday school is not a very good way to determine if you're saved or not. Anyway, there's another story I'll tell you. It's about my wife's great aunt. She was a wicked, mean-spirited woman. No one liked her. Her husband was Sheriff Phillips, who was associated with the Hatfields and the McCoy situation. That's where my wife is from. And he was known to just pull out his pistol and shoot people. And that's the kind of woman she was. She was mean-spirited. And on her deathbed, she was lying in her deathbed and the family was around, and all of a sudden she started screaming, "Don't let them get me! Don't let them get me! They've come to get me! They've got chains and they're going to come and get me!" And with that, she died screaming. I don't think that was a heavenly experience. But you can compare this one to another one of my wife's aunts. Not a great aunt, just an aunt. She was elderly and she was living with her daughter. And she knew that her time was getting near, and she told her daughter, she said, now, today for lunch, I'd like you to fix me bacon and eggs and some toast, because the Lord is going to come for me at lunchtime. And her daughter said, "Okay, Mom, I'll do that." Well, as lunchtime approached, she fixed her bacon and eggs, and her aunt or her mother ate them and the toast. She sat in her chair and she looked and she said, "Oh, look, here he comes." And with that, she died. With that, she died. I got one more for you. I have a friend, a good friend, uh, who lives down in eastern Kentucky in Appalachia. He was a coal miner. He worked in coal miners and he has owned coal mines. And um, I don't know what happened to send him to the hospital, but he was on the surgeon's table and they cut him open to work on him and he died. And he left his body and he just floated in the room for a few minutes. And then he went back into his body and he woke up and he knew what happened. He knew he had a near death experience. And he asked the Lord, "Does everybody that dies have this kind of a wonderful experience?" Another thing that he felt when he was out of his body, it was the peace that surpasses all understanding. He just, he was so at peace, and then he had to go back to his body. Sorry, I missed that. Uh, so he asked the Lord, "Is it always like this for people?" And the Lord didn't answer him. So some weeks later, he was at the local jail. He's also a chaplain for the local jail. And this inmate came into the room one Sunday. This was for a service, and this man was just practically glowing. He was so full of the Spirit of God that you could look at him and tell there was something going on. And he looked over at Mark and he said, "I want to talk to you. I got a testimony to tell you." So he got over to the side and started telling Mark about his life briefly. And he said, "I was on the operating table and I died." And he said, "I went into a tunnel and I was going down and it was dark and I didn't like the feeling of it." And he says, "I got scared because I knew where I was. I was where I deserved to be." And then he called out to Jesus and he said, "Please save me." He said, "I know I haven't had a good life, but I just feel like if I could have a second chance, I could do it again and I would do it right." And with that, he woke up on the surgeon's table and they finished working on him and he gave his life to the Lord. And he still had time to serve in jail. He had done something. But he told Mark, he said, "I'm all right with it now." He said, "I know where I'm going to die the next. I know where I will be the next time I die." So there's some NDEs for you. I thought that you would enjoy them. I hope you did.